What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and to another 3D model. This week, we're going to be making a coffee maker, or an espresso maker. There's a few different names for this sort of device, but we're going to create one of these today. And I thought we would do something a little bit fun. Not only am I a big coffee fan, and I thought it would just be fun to make for this week's video, but I also decided to make a fully narrated real-time video for all of my Patreons. So I know it may not be the most exciting model in the world, but I thought it'd be just a great one to do a full tutorial on. So once again, if you're interested in checking out that tutorial video, you can find it on my Patreon page, which will be linked in the description below. And I'm planning to upload more narrated real-time videos, so check it out. It's the best way to help support my art. So when it came to the coffee maker, I decided to jump on Google Images and find some random reference. I actually have one of these at my house. It's a red one, so I decided to have that in front of me on my desk as well. So here's a photo of what that looks like. But I also found these other random photos of coffee makers on Google Images, and I really like the worn, beaten up kind of look with the brown kind of burnt bottom, like it's been used many times. So I was hoping to eventually do that as well when it comes to the texturing process, kind of make it look a little bit more used. And we also go over really quickly in the video high and low poly modeling. So in this video, I'm just going to create more or less one high poly mesh, but I'm also going to show you really quickly the low poly. It's honestly the exact same thing, just no bevels and just very blocked out. And you're gonna rely on your baking to bake all that curvature and that nice detail. So that's something we're gonna go over later on when we go over the UVs. But for now, we just need to start blocking out our main shapes. And one of the biggest decisions I had to make at the beginning was, did I want to attach all my metal components? So what do I mean by that? It's basically the front spout. We can simplify this whole model by just having those two objects kind of intersect and letting the baking kind of do the magic. Anyways, it's always fun seeing those seams and the nice beveled rounded edges, so I thought it'd be fun to do that for this week's video. Now we're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. In this video, I'm talking in the background, so for the Patreon video, so if you're noticing me stop at random places, it's probably because I'm just chatting to the screen. But once again, if you want to see that full video, it will be linked below in the description. All right, so like you already saw, I imported those image planes that I found on Google, just a top-down version into my top-down viewport and a side profile into my side viewport. Then I just insert a cylinder and start blocking it out. Now, one funny thing I noticed, almost like at the beginning of the modeling, it's just that my coffee maker here at home is 10 sides and my reference is 6. And I didn't spot that right away, or sorry, the reference is actually 8-sided. So I decided to start off with a 10-sided cylinder, but like I said, it doesn't align properly with my reference and it doesn't change it too much, but it is something I didn't catch right away. So if you notice that, that's the reason why my red coffee maker here is 10-sided. So anyways, after inserting my 10-sided cylinder, I can start blocking out the main shapes, and I'm not going to worry about getting everything perfectly attached right now. I just want to block out the main shapes in my reference photo. So let's start doing that. Let's just take our time, scale these cylinders around. Basically, it's one cylinder for the top, one for the bottom, and then a few cubes for the other shapes in my scene. So let's start blocking it out, and let's make this coffee maker. right, so here is the espresso maker or coffee maker in its finished form. So let's go over the UVs really quickly. Once again, if you want to see the full process narrated and in real time, it will be available on my Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the description below. So let's open up the UV editor, and you'll notice that I only have one material applied. It's a pretty straightforward object and there's not too many assets involved, so one material will definitely be enough. Now, I did talk about throughout the UV process as well that if I were to straighten some of these shells, you would probably be able to fit these a little bit better together. So for example, I could use the straighten UVs tool under the unfold, and then I can come in with my optimize tool or unfold tool to fix these top pieces. Let me just drag this out. And then you can re-straighten it again. You can do some stuff like that, some tricks to get those UVs looking nice and straight, but you're gonna get a little bit, the slightest bit of skewing because it's not a perfectly rounded shape. So I decided just to leave it unfolded by pressing Control U and just going with that curved shape. But the main thing was just trying to fill in my 0 to 1 space as much as I could to make most of my resolution out of my materials, and also give priority to the more important ones. So these shells, for example, they are the biggest because, well, they're the biggest pieces on my model, and I don't really care about this inside piece because you're never going to see that detail. It's going to be in shadow. Or I don't really care about this bottom face too much, this shell. There's certain shells that are just less important because you're not going to see them. So I tried to give priority to the larger shells, that way I can get more detail in those pieces. Now, approach with caution. If you're working with a team, you need specific texel density in your project, then you can go with the auto layout, or you can set your texel density here in your project. But that's also something we can go over in a different video. But that's just how I laid out these UV shells. So I just added one material to it. I'm not going to worry about my low poly. I was thinking about doing it quickly for the YouTube video, for the Patreon video, but I just didn't have a lot of time. But this is exactly, or very close to what I would do. So I would just make it fit a little bit tighter to the model. That way that information can transfer over nicely in the bake. So anyways, let's export this. Let's jump over to Substance Painter, and we can start the texturing process. All right, now jumping over to Substance Painter, we can go ahead and load in that FBX file from Maya. Now, like I said many times, this whole process will be available in real time, which is fully narrated. So I go through everything, kind of talk to you as I'm texturing all the assets. But if you want access to it, you can find it on my Patreon page, which I will also link in the description below. Now, when it came to the textures, the model or the coffee maker I have here at home is red. So I was debating if I wanted to add some color to it, but in my mind, when I think of these specific coffee makers, they're always metal, or usually, besides mine. So I thought we would just go with that classic metal look. And I really like these reference photos that I showed earlier, and I really like the beaten up kind of used look that it has, the burnt kind of bottom from being on the stove, and just the little scratches and the use, rather than it being a brand new coffee maker. So we're gonna start off by just kind of filling in these meshes with some sort of material. I'm really gonna take advantage of Substance Painter's smart materials. I find they're fantastic, especially if you're trying to work fast. And that's what we're doing today. So I'm just gonna fill in those meshes. It's gonna help me figure out how I want these colors and materials to look. And then I'm gonna kind of use those smart materials as a foundation. Then we can start adding different fill layers to add different smart masks, and just to kind of build up some grunge and dirt and make it look a little bit more used. We're gonna slowly build up these layers, try not to rush it too much. That way we can just gradually make it look more beaten up, not just add one material or one sort of effect and try to wrap it up that quickly, because it just won't look that real. We need to slowly build it up. And metals can also be kind of tricky. It's weird how sometimes it can look super reflective, and when you export those materials in a different lighting environment, they look a little bit different. So one thing I like to do is work with a white light, especially when dealing with metal materials. So I'm just gonna change that environment lighting source rather than panorama, which comes as your standard lighting in Substance. I'm gonna switch it to one of the studio lights because it's a white light and it's not gonna add any color into my metal. So hopefully when I export these materials or I jump into Photoshop for those final little touch-ups, well, the colors aren't gonna look too different than they do right here in Substance. So white lights are always good if you want more accuracy, and especially I find when you're dealing with reflective materials like metal. So don't worry if it doesn't look the best. Metal's a tricky one. You just need to keep adjusting the roughness values and metallic values until you find something that you're happy with. So don't be too stressed, just keep playing around with it and it will slowly look better over time. All right, let's start texturing this coffee maker. All right, and that is everything. That is the full 3D modeling, UV mapping, and texturing process that I did to create this coffee maker. I really hope you guys enjoyed this week's video, and if you did, let me know in the comments and maybe give this video a like or even subscribe to the channel. That would definitely help me out. And don't forget, you can find this full video narrated in real time all on my Patreon page. And we go through everything. The full UV process is kind of like more of a tutorial based video. So if you think that's something you'd be interested in, please go check it out. You can find it on my Patreon page or in the link in the description below. And as always, I want to give a massive shout out to all my Patreons. Thank you so much for your continuous support and for being with me on this journey. It goes such a long way in helping support my page, so thank you so much for being here. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this week's video, and I will catch you all in the next one.